you see here, the traditionalists will ask us, what about the verses below? Because there are verses which can suggest authority given to hadith and sunnah. Obey Allah and obey the messenger. Why do you need obey Allah and obey the messenger if in fact it's not obeying Quran and obeying hadith? I was taken by this. I thought this is a marvelous argument. The problem is, in the Quran itself, obeying Allah and obeying the messenger amounts to the same thing. If you see chapter 8 verse 20, for example, it says, obey Allah, obey the messenger, and do not turn away from him. Do not turn away from him. What it means is, when you hear the voice of the messenger, you don't turn away from him. You don't hear the voice of Allah. You see? So the messenger is the representative of Allah. That's why chapter 4 verse 80 says, he who has obeyed the messenger has obeyed Allah. You see? So obeying the messenger and obeying Allah are actually the same thing. The reason why they are in two separate things in the wording is because one is something you're obeying as you hear, the other is the ultimate authority whom you are obeying. That's how the Quran seems to explain it. The messenger explains the Quran. Chapter 16 verse 44. This is another common argument given. And the key word here is litubayyina, that he makes clear. He was given the Quran that he makes clear to mankind. The problem is, and I've answered this in my videos before as well, the verse quoted is never quoted in full. It's always quoted, we have sent down the dhikr that he may explain to mankind. It doesn't start with bil bayinat was zubur. That's how the verse starts, bil bayinat was zubur. And bil bayinat means with clarifications. Where do you find the clarifications? You find it in the Quran. The Quran says in chapter 98 verses 2 to 3 that the Quran has the kutub, the books or commands which are clarified by the messenger. The messenger is reciting them to you, and that's how you get the messenger's explanation or clarification. The Prophet is the most beautiful example. This is again, we see that if the Prophet is the most beautiful example, how can we understand this without reading hadith? So, fair question. But what about Ibrahim? He is also the most beautiful example. Chapter 16 verses 4 and 6, so he's repeated twice. He's called most beautiful example twice. But we don't go to some other source to look for his examples. We can find it in the Quran. It's the same with the Prophet. We can find his examples in the Quran. For example, it says that the Prophet is lenient over you. Chapter 9 verse 1 to 8. He is soft unto you. He is like a womb to you. So these are his examples, how he behaved. And if we copy these examples, we will be following his most beautiful example. This is quite clear. I mean, does it make sense for a book to say his most beautiful example, only to find that the sources which exemplify him were not codified until 250 years? Doesn't make any sense. Everything the Prophet says or does is inspired. Now, this is another prevalent argument which traditionalist says. The problem is, you have verses in the Quran which record the Prophet's mistakes. Chapter 66 verse 1, the Prophet is reprimanded. He was said, Allah said to him, why do you make haram with what Allah made halal for you? So at this point, you have to ask yourself, did Allah inspire him to make this mistake? If Allah inspired him to make this mistake, is it right that Allah reprimands him? So these are the things which you need to consider. I don't find that logical at all. I find that if the Prophet makes mistakes, it must come from himself. And so he was not inspired at all times. So here's the question, how is Quranist Islam different? We are a work in progress. You will never find any Quranist, even though I admit some people act like it, but you will never find Quranists saying, okay, we have the final answers. We do not have such people simply because we know the Quran is an infinity of information. It's simply opening up to us as we keep researching. I mean, I've been researching the Quran by itself for about maybe 15, 16 years now, and I'm still at the surface. There are things which I still could not have fathomed before now. You know, so I would never want to say I have all the final answers. You are free to say you are wrong. And this is something which you cannot easily find in Islamic spaces. Can you imagine going to Finsbury Park Mosque, for example? You know, Abu Hamza just gave a lecture on jihad and so on, and then you get, I'm sorry, you're wrong. You're a man of violence. It's just not going to happen. Why? Because it's just not that kind of place. So this is a place where you are free to say you're wrong. You are free to say, well, you know what? We disagree with you. Would someone mind just saying, you know, to them,